They got to Provincetown Harbor on Cape Cod, and they began to discuss how they were going to govern themselves, how they were going to get along together. And they came to an agreement, and they wrote it down on paper, and they signed it. And we call that the Mayflower Compact. And America, the United States of America, was not to be born for another 156 years. But on that day when they signed that document, the heart of America began to beat, because the Mayflower Compact had within its pages the concept, very loud and clear, of equal justice for all. In the year 1787, we had won our independence. America was a country. We were 11 years old. And I've got 5 children, and any of you have children know that 11-year-olds need a little guidance. And so, as any 11-year-old would, our founding, or for a country that young, our founding fathers set out to develop a constitution for this country that would guide us and guide our principles and our laws. But they didn't just sit down and start writing out a constitution. They gathered together on May the 14th of 1787, and they argued and they fought and fussed and they poured out their hearts to each other, and they fought for the provisions that they wanted to have in that Constitution. And they continued that fight for 126 days. And finally, when they got to the end of that process and they began to write down the Constitution, it might surprise some of you to learn that they did not begin with Article 1. They began by writing a paragraph at the beginning of that Constitution that proclaimed to the world and to future generations what we were all about and who we were, and why they were providing a Constitution that would guide us in how we operated as a country. And in the very first paragraph of that Constitution, our founders listed 5 reasons why we had won our independence and fought, and why we were drafting a Constitution, and what we were going to be like, and who we were going to be. It was a picture of our heart as a country. And the very first reason that they put in that paragraph was to form a more perfect union. The second reason was not to provide for the common defense. That was to come later. And it was not to promote the general welfare. That was to come later. And secure the blessings of liberty. You know what's in the preamble. The second reason that our founders put in our Constitution as to why we even have one was to establish justice. The first 17 words of our Constitution are "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union and establish justice." Now, I believe that the Congress of the United States is filled with patriots. I do. So I have to wonder why in the world they would ever even consider cutting off the funding for the only program the Congress has ever instituted to fund legal services and provide access to justice to our citizens. Why would they ever even consider that? I believe at least part of the answer can be found in the words of a song that I used to like a lot called "The Boxer," written by Paul Simon in 1968. It's a song about a young boy who goes to New York City, and he struggles with poverty and with loneliness, and he fights that city. And the lyrics of the song talk about the boy seeking out the places where the ragged people go, looking for the places only they would know. And it talks about his loneliness, and he cries out for help. And according to the lyrics of the song, no one hears him, because a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. I teach evidence at the Mississippi College Law School in Jackson, Mississippi. I've been teaching for about 8 years, and every year my students, at the beginning of the semester, I have just a conversation with them to find out what they think about the law. And I always ask them the question, what do you think makes America great? We're a great country. What makes us great? A lot of countries in this world. They always say the same thing, at least most of them do. They say what you would probably say if I asked you that question today. A constitution. We have a great constitution. And I say, why do you say that? What's so great about it? And they say, well, we've got the First Amendment and it provides all of these freedom of speech and the press and all of that. The Second Amendment, some of them say, freedom to bear arms and Fourth, and all the protections of the Fourth and the Fifth and the Sixth and the Eighth Amendment and the 14th and all of this, and they're just all excited about all of these provisions of the Constitution. And when they're done, I always love doing this and watching their faces. When they're done, I say to them, I want to read to you from something that I brought to class. And it's some of the provisions from some of the from some of the countries around the world who also have today or have had constitutions. And I always begin with the People's Republic of China. Article 2, the Constitution of the People's Republic of China. All power in the People's Republic of China belong to the people. Article 33, all citizens of the People's Republic of China are equal before the law. Article 35, citizens of the People's Republic of China enjoy freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, of association, of procession, and of demonstration. Article 36, citizens of the People's Republic of China enjoy freedom of religious belief. Article 37, freedom of the person of citizens of the People's Republic of China may not be violated. Article 39, unlawful search or intrusion into a citizen's residence is prohibited. Article 41, this is a good one. Article 41, citizens of the People's Republic of China have the right, this is constitutional right, citizens of the People's Republic of China have the constitutional right to criticize the state. Article 48, women in the People's Republic of China enjoy equal rights with men in all spheres of life. I then turn to the 1936 Constitution that was adopted by the communists in Russia. This was 19 years following the Bolshevik Revolution. The communists, USSR, their constitution. Article 25, citizens of the USSR are guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of assembly, including the holding of mass meetings and freedom of street processions, like that festival I tried to fight through last night. Freedom of street processions and demonstrations. Article 127, no person may be placed under arrest except by decision of a court. That's in the USSR. And then I tell my students, if you still aren't convinced that having a great constitution is not what makes us great, let me read to you from the constitution that was in effect when Hitler took power in the Third Reich. Article 107, in the Reich and in the states, courts have to exist according to law to protect the individual against bureaucratic decrees. Article 109, all Germans are equal in front of the law. Men and women have the same rights and obligations. Legal privileges and advantages based on birth or social standing are to be abolished. Article 135, all Reich inhabitants enjoy full freedom of liberty and conscience. And this is my personal favorite. Undisturbed practice of religion is guaranteed by the Constitution and placed under the protection of the state. We have a great Constitution in America. There's no doubt about that. Our Constitution provides that no state shall deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor to deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. And if any of you have ever been to Washington, D.C., the United States Supreme Courthouse, I've been there once to hear an oral argument. It's an impressive sight. And if you walk up on the east side of that huge courthouse, they have 8 marble columns, not granite, marble. They're made out of marble. Beautiful sight. And above those marble columns are the words, equal justice under law. And if you walk around to the west side of the U.S. Supreme Court building and look up, you'll see the words carved in the marble, justice, the guardian of liberty. Those are all mighty pretty words, but they don't mean anything. They don't mean anything if they aren't applied to the lives of the least of our citizens. There's a young couple in Mississippi, Christina and Daniel Chambly. They're good people, proud people. Daniel, disabled, and Christina is not all that educated. And they live in poverty. They have 2 little girls. One day a neighbor filed a false complaint against the Chambleys, and the Department of Human Services drove up in their yard. 2 people got out of the car and knocked on the door, answered the door, and they said, "We're here to get your little girls." I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, there's been a complaint of neglect filed, and we're here to get your children." And they took their children, put them in the car, and they drove away. Now, do you think the 14th Amendment that I read to you just a minute ago of the United States Constitution says to people like the Chambleys, the state of Mississippi cannot take your children and keep them away from you without at least providing you a lawyer so that you can stand up in court and fight to get them back on a basis equal with the state of Mississippi? Do you think the 14th Amendment says that? Well, if you do, you'd be wrong, at least under current constitutional interpretation. Now, there are some states who have provided some help to people like the Chambleys under those circumstances, and they have statutory rights to lawyers. And a few courts in states have ruled they have the right to a lawyer, but the United States Supreme Court has not said so. In fact, it said no. And in Mississippi, they were on their own. But a legal services lawyer named Terry Walker took their case, went to court for them and fought for them, showed what really happened, that it was a false complaint, and got the Chambleys their children back. Daniel was later interviewed about how he felt, what was going through his mind when they took his children. And that big, strong man looked at that interviewer and he said, "I honestly believe if it hadn't been for legal services," he called it legal aid, "if it hadn't been for legal aid, we would never have seen our children again." Judy Mills, young mother of 2, abused woman. One occasion, her husband threw her up against a wall and picked up a fork and slashed her face. He would leave her and the children for long periods of time with no money. On one occasion, no electricity in the house, no food in the house. Judy was asked at one point what went through her mind when she was going through that dark period in her life. And Judy said, "As horrible as it sounds, I just wanted him to go ahead and kill me." A legal aid lawyer named Brent Shellhammer took Judy's case and went to court and fought for her. Got her a divorce, got her children, got custody of her children, got protection for her and her children. And they now live in relative peace. Third story I want to tell you about is a young woman named Anna Aleman, teenager, disabled. All she ever wanted to do in her life was just to help people, work with people, and help people, do something good with her life. But her disability and some medical problems that she had led the state to take her from her home and move toward putting her in an institution, a nursing home. Because in their opinion, she couldn't deal with the educational system and she couldn't deal with society. Somebody asked Anna later what was going through her mind when the state threatened to take her away and put her in a nursing home. I believe her answer should be engraved above the door of every courthouse in America, so that we judges would have to read it every day when we go to work. This is what she said. She said, "I felt like, what am I going to do? I don't know what to do. I don't know the laws, I don't know what my rights are. What am I going to do?" A legal aid attorney named Lucy Wood did know what to do and did know what her rights were and took up her case, filed a lawsuit, and forced the school system to take her back. She got her education. She now has a family. She lives a productive life. I am as a justice on the Supreme Court and someone who's had the opportunity to observe other judges, and not just from the other side of the bench when they're telling me what to do, but my peers, I am so thankful that we do have a number of judges in this country who believe in the rule of law, who believe in constitutional rights, who believe that every citizen has a right to come in their courtroom and their constitutional rights protected. And they're willing to enforce the Constitution even when it's difficult to do. And I want to tell you something. Justice Tuck over here will tell you the same thing. Sometimes it's not easy to do. It's okay. Can y'all hear me okay? Yes?
You're being lecture captured. It won't pick up.
Okay. You're the boss. What do I do with this?
Just put it in your pocket.
1, 2, 3. Is it working? I think you'll agree with me that there are plenty of occasions when the Constitution is easy to enforce. There are plenty of cases where the facts of the case and the arguments that are before the court make it very easy to enforce constitutional rights, but sometimes it's not so easy. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to do. But the message I have for my fellow justices on the Supreme Courts around the country and fellow judges in the trial courtrooms, and not to be presumptuous, but for the United States Supreme Court, the message I have is this. We have a lot of colleagues out there, and I know this to be true. We have a lot of judges in this country who have not yet quite accepted the role that the judiciary plays in our system of government. They have not yet quite understood and accepted that every citizen, rich or poor, no matter what their station in life, they're supposed to stand in our courtroom equal. They have not quite yet accepted that every citizen has the right to come into court and to stand equal to every other right. We judges are the protectors of constitutional rights. We are the guardians of constitutional rights. We're the ones that are supposed to put the equal in equal justice. But if our Congress, and I say this with all humility, but all seriousness, if our Congress and if our legislatures around the country continue to look at legal services programs as if they're just some other social program capable of being wiped out with a stroke of a pen, if they continue to do that, then we judges, we in the judiciary, have some very serious and important constitutional decisions to make, I believe, in the future. Much the same as a very courageous decision made by one of your Chancery Court judges back in, I think, 1994, when she had the courage to stand up and say the educational system in the state of Arkansas is not being constitutionally operated, that districts are not being equitably funded as required by the Constitution of the state of Arkansas. It was not an easy decision. She made it. And the courage of the Arkansas Supreme Court to stand behind her and say she's right. And I want you to know that I am privileged and I am proud to call her my friend, Justice Annabelle Ember Tuck, who is not just a champion of education in Arkansas. She is a champion of equal justice throughout this country. She's one of the people that got me involved in this, and for that I'll forever be grateful to her. I think y'all should give her a hand. I know we don't have just a few judges here, but I'll say something to them through you and the rest of you who may communicate with me. You can tell them I said it, or you can write it down and let them read it. But I say this in all honesty. I know that I'm right. You know as well as I do that the reduction in funding for legal services across this country is forcing more and more and more people to come into court and to represent themselves. Self-represented litigants, pro se litigants, whatever you want to call them. You ask most judges today, what problem, so what? What's the problem with that? What's wrong with people representing themselves? And the answer that you'll almost always get, and I've said it myself, many times, the answer you'll almost always get is clogs up the courtrooms, clogs up the docket, makes justice move more slowly. That's the problem. And I admit to you, I've said it myself, but every time I hear it, I cringe. The real problem caused by a system that says to poor people, you have to go into court and represent yourself if you don't have the money to provide yourself a lawyer. The real problem with that is that our courtrooms and our courts and our justice system is not producing fair trials. We're producing unjust results. Shouldn't we care about that? Shouldn't that be what we're concerned about, that our courts and our judicial system produces fair results? Many, many times, it's just a simple truth. Poor people lose cases they should win. Why? Because they don't have the money to hire a lawyer. Equal justice for all is a great concept, but it's not reality. It's just not. We have 46 million people in this country who live in poverty. 16 million children in this country live in poverty. And for them, every day, the courtroom doors close just a little bit more and a little bit more. Now, I know that we've all been working hard. I know most of you work in legal services. We have a few students here, and as I said, a couple of judges, but most of you work in legal services, and you've been getting the emails and the phone calls. You know what's going on. We've been fighting to get the funding in Congress. The House of Representatives says for the entire United States of America, we're going to provide $320-something million, and the Senate says $402 million that President Obama recommended. And they've been up there fighting and debating, and we've been sending emails and making visits to the congressional offices, begging them to get the money up and all the rest of it. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what they're going to end up appropriating, but I want to tell you something straight from me. If they pass the bill today, $402 million that the Senate has recommended, and if President Obama signed it into law tomorrow, I will not say that I'm satisfied with it. I will not. $402 million will not produce equal justice for all in America. It won't even come close. You know, we're talking about an essential function of government here. We're not talking about building a road or a federal building or some park somewhere. We're not talking about providing cell phone services for the poor people. Did you know that the federal government spends $1 billion every year providing cell phone service for poor people? Now look, I'm not against poor people having cell phones. Don't quote me saying I don't think poor people ought to have cell phones. That's not the point. My point is this. Don't they realize that having equal and fair access to the courts and to the justice system is a little bit more important than having a cell phone? What if they gave that $1 billion instead of the 300-something million we're going to end up with, hopefully? And there's a pretty good movement in Washington to just wipe it out, zero. But what if they gave that $1 billion to legal services and said, use this to provide legal services and legal representation to poor people? What could we do with it? What if, and I could think of 100 programs that I could cite to you right now, but I won't go, as I said, but don't get me started. But just think about that. Think about the relative importance of those two things. Let me close by saying this. We need, in my opinion, a constitutional interpretation or a law that says to the Chamblies and the Judy Mills and the Anna Ottomans of this country, the government cannot come in and put your basic fundamental rights at risk without providing you a lawyer. I know that's pretty radical, but I don't care. We need that interpretation and we need that law. And we need to have it in place in order to provide people the protection that our Constitution guarantees them. I know some people call that civil Gideon, but I don't. I call it what is required to fulfill the promise of America, what is required to keep America great. You know, my law students turn back on me when I read those constitutions to them. They then do what all law students do. They try to get out of trouble by just turning the question back to you, so they always do. They say, well, what do you say makes America great? And I say, what makes America great, in my opinion, Terrell Walker, Brent Shellhammer, Lucy Wood. It's people like some of you in this room, people who get up every day and go out and fight day after day, underfunded, unappreciated, but day after day. They go out and they fight to make our Constitution work. That's what makes America great. It's people who are dedicated to the proposition that equal justice for all and due process of law are not just some words to be carved in marble above some courthouse door. They're real and they mean something. They mean something to our people. What's required to make America great, or what makes America great, and what is required to keep us great, are people who understand that every citizen, rich or poor, no matter what their station in life, every person is entitled to stand equal in our courtrooms. Every person, even the ragged people that Paul Simon talks about in his song, they're entatled to stand equal in our courts. They may not be entitled to have equal bank accounts. They may not be entitled to equally be members of country clubs or have equal cars, but they have a constitutional right to stand equal in our courts. That's what we're doing here. That's why we're here. That's why you're here. And it's something we can't forget. I want to say to you, on behalf of 46 million people who live in America in poverty, on behalf of 16 million precious children who struggle with poverty every day, I want to say thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you believe in. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for caring about this problem that so many people care nothing about. Thank you on their behalf. Thank you on my behalf, and may God bless you.